Mom laughed. You'll never have a home like your sister. Sister mocked. She'll stay poor forever. I stayed silent. Weeks later they called from my gate. My reply. Leave my land. My name's Harper, and this is the story of how I went from being the family's biggest disappointment to the one who ended up with everything they envied. And how sometimes the best revenge is just living well and setting firm boundaries. Let me rewind to where it all began. I'm the younger of two daughters. My older sister Caroline was always the golden one. She was 3 years ahead of me, and from the time I could remember it was obvious I was growing up in her shadow. Caroline was the type of person who looked like she had life figured out. Beautiful, polished, smart, and effortlessly charming. She graduated at the top of her class, got into an Ivy League school on a partial scholarship, and went straight into a corporate job pulling in 6 figures. Me? I was the artsy one, the dreamer, the girl who wanted to study graphic design instead of business. I picked a state college because I actually liked their program, not because of prestige. After graduation, I took a job at a small creative agency. The paycheck was modest, but the work felt meaningful and I loved it. To my mom, though, I had already failed at life by 22. The comparison started when I was a kid and never let up. Why can't you be more like your sister? Was practically my mother's favorite sentence. When Caroline bought her first house at 26 with her fiancé Lucas, who was a lawyer, it became the new gold standard for success. I was 23 at the time, sharing a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, building my career and paying off student loans. I was proud of my independence, proud that I was carving my own path, but to my mom, I was just the child who couldn't seem to get her life together. The breaking point came last Thanksgiving. I'd driven 3 hours to my parents' place, hoping maybe this year would be different. Maybe my mom would care about my work, my life, my happiness. Maybe I'd finally feel like part of the family. Caroline and Lucas pulled up in their Mercedes, and the praise started instantly. They had just bought their second property, a vacation home in the mountains. My mom beamed as Caroline flipped through photos on her phone, showing off a gorgeous cabin with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a hot tub on the deck. We got a great deal, Caroline bragged. Lucas's bonus this year was amazing. That's wonderful, sweetheart, my mom gushed. You two are so successful. I'm so proud of you. I sat there, eating my mashed potatoes, really trying to be happy for her. But then my mom turned toward me with that look, the one that meant something cruel was coming, wrapped up to sound like concern. Harper, honey, are you still renting that little place downtown? Yes, Mom. Same apartment. It's actually nice. We just repainted last month. Caroline laughed, barely hiding her disdain. You repainted a rental? That's kind of sad. You know you'll never see that money again, right? I like where I live, I said quietly. But you're still renting, my mom pushed. At your age, you should be building equity, investing. Caroline had her first house by 26. You're 25, aren't you? I'll be 26 in January. Exactly my point, she said, shaking her head like I was a hopeless case. You'll never own a house like your sister. Not at this rate. The words hit hard. Caroline smirked across the table, that same smug smile I'd seen my whole life. She'll be broke forever, Mom. That's what happens when you chase passion instead of stability. I told her to pick a practical career, but she wouldn't listen. My dad shifted beside me, looking uneasy, but as always he stayed silent. He never stepped in. He just sat there while they tore me down. Something inside me cracked that day, but not the way they expected. I didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't explain my 5-year plan or mention the promotion I was up for. I just smiled. A small one, but it was real. Because in that moment I realized something huge. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to them. Their opinions simply didn't matter. You might be right, I said calmly, finishing my potatoes. My mom blinked, surprised I wasn't fighting back. Caroline looked almost disappointed. I stayed another hour, then excused myself, saying I had work the next day. I drove home with tears running down my face, not from pain but from freedom. Freedom from their judgment, from their expectations, from constantly trying to earn their love. That night marked a turning point. I'd played it safe for years, steady job, slow savings, doing everything the responsible way. But those cruel words lit a fire in me. I realized I'd been playing small, living to please people who'd never be satisfied. What they didn't know was that I was actually damn good at what I did. For 2 years I'd been freelancing on the side, logos, websites, branding for small businesses, and I had built a solid list of clients. But I kept it small, afraid to take the leap. That night I decided it was time to bet on myself. Within a week, I registered my freelance business, set up an LLC, built a professional website to showcase my best work, and started promoting my services full-time. I reached out to everyone I'd ever crossed paths with, joined online groups for small business owners, and started positioning myself as a branding specialist for startups and growing companies. The response blew me away. Apparently, I'd been selling myself short for years. When I adjusted my rates to match what professionals in my field were charging, people still booked me without hesitation. Within 3 months, my freelance work was bringing in more than my full-time paycheck. By the 6th month, I handed in my resignation and went all in on my business. I didn't breathe a word of it to my family. Why bother? They'd already made it clear how little they respected my path. I kept communication polite but distant, only replying to texts when necessary and declining family gatherings with the excuse of work deadlines. My mom called it rebellion. Caroline told everyone I was being childish. I called it protecting my peace. For the first time, I was building something that was completely mine. My business started to grow faster than I could have imagined. I brought on a virtual assistant to help with admin, then hired a junior designer to handle smaller projects. Before long, I carved out a niche in branding for tech startups, and word of mouth spread fast. I was earning more money than I'd ever dreamed of, but what mattered most was how fulfilled I felt. I woke up every morning excited to create, to meet new clients, to do work that genuinely inspired me. I chose who I worked with. I set the terms. I shaped my own life, and it finally felt right. About 8 months later, I was sitting with my accountant Mark when he looked up from my financials and said something that stopped me cold. "Harper, you're sitting on a healthy amount of cash. Have you thought about investing? Real estate might be smart for you." Real estate. The one thing my mother said I'd never have. I started researching that same week. I met with a real estate agent named Diane, a sharp woman in her 50s with a calm confidence that immediately put me at ease. She didn't flinch when I told her my budget. She'd seen my numbers and knew I was serious. "What kind of place are you looking for?" she asked during our first meeting. "Something with soul," I said. "Something that feels like it has a story. I don't want one of those cookie-cutter houses in a subdivision." She smiled. "I think I know exactly what you need." Over the next few weekends, we toured a bunch of homes. Sleek lofts downtown, cute bungalows in up-and-coming neighborhoods, even an old warehouse turned into a modern loft. They were all beautiful, but none of them felt like me. I was starting to lose hope when Diane called one Tuesday afternoon. "I might have something, but it's a bit of a fixer-upper. Are you open to renovations?" "Depends on the house," I said. "Trust me on this one," she replied. "Can you meet me tomorrow in Millbrook Heights?" The next morning, I followed her directions to a neighborhood I'd only ever driven through a few times. Even the name Millbrook Heights sounded out of my league. It was the kind of place where families had deep roots, where the houses were protected by the local historical society, and every lawn looked like it belonged on a postcard. As we turned onto Rosewood Avenue, I felt my breath catch. The street was shaded by massive oak trees arching overhead, and each house had its own unique charm: wraparound porches, turrets, stained glass, flower-filled gardens. Diane parked in front of a pale yellow Victorian with white trim. It looked like something out of a storybook, 3 stories tall, a turret on one side, and a porch that wrapped around like it was made for lazy summer evenings. "It's been listed for 6 weeks, Diane said as we walked up the stone path. "The owner, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, is 93 and moving into assisted living. She's very particular about who she sells to. She's already turned down 3 offers above asking." "Why?" I asked. "She wants someone who'll love it. Her husband built this place for her in the 1940s. They raised 4 kids here, she lost him here, and now she's finally ready to let it go. But not to just anyone." The second I stepped through the front door, I knew. The original hardwood floors were worn in all the right places. The staircase curved gracefully, its banister carved with the kind of craftsmanship you never see anymore. Light from the stained glass window spilled across the walls in soft colors. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper a story. The kitchen was dated. Appliances from the 70s, counters begging to be replaced. The bathrooms needed full remodels. Wallpaper peeled in spots, and there were a few ceiling stains from old leaks. But the structure was solid. The ceilings were high, the molding detailed, built-in shelves lined the living room, and the fireplace had a hand-carved mantel that took my breath away. Then I saw the turret room. A circular space surrounded by tall windows that flooded it with natural light. This, I said quietly, stepping into it. This would be my office. Diane smiled. Should I set up a meeting with Mrs. Hartwell? Yes, I said immediately. Please do. 2 days later, I met Eleanor Hartwell in the living room of the house that had already stolen my heart. She was small and elegant, with a sharp mind and warm blue eyes. Diane tells me you own your own business, she said, motioning for me to sit. Yes, ma'am, I replied. Graphic design and branding. I work with startups and small businesses. You're young to be looking at a place like this, she said thoughtfully. Most people your age want something new, low maintenance. I want something with history, I told her. Something that matters. She studied me carefully, then asked, why this house? I paused thinking. I could have talked about investment value or potential profit, but that wasn't the truth. Because when I walked in, I said, it felt like home. I grew up feeling like I never quite fit anywhere, like I was always trying to make myself fit into spaces that weren't meant for me. But this house, even with all the work it needed, felt like it had been waiting for someone like me. Someone who would see its beauty beneath the wear, who would cherish its history and breathe new life into it without erasing what it had been. Eleanor's eyes softened. My Henry said almost the same thing when he first saw this land, she murmured. He told me he could already see our future here. The home we'd build together. Her fingers brushed the arm of her chair gently. This house has carried a lot of love, a lot of living. I just need to know that will continue. I met her gaze and said, if you sell me this home, I promise I'll honor its story while making it my own. Every change I make will respect its character and the life that's already here. She nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Then let's talk numbers. The negotiations stretched over 2 weeks. Eleanor didn't need the money, which gave her leverage, but she truly cared about finding the right person, which gave me hope. We landed on a fair price that pushed my finances to the edge but felt worth every penny. When closing day came, Eleanor insisted on being there. After we signed the papers, she placed an old brass key in my hand. This was the original key to the front door, she said softly. Henry had it made the day we moved in. I want you to have it. My eyes stung with tears. Thank you, I whispered. I'll take good care of it. She smiled. I know you will, dear. That was how I ended up with it. The dream home I never thought I'd have. Millbrook Heights was the most prestigious neighborhood in the city. All historic houses and tree-lined streets. The kind of place where wealth ran deep and family names meant something. My mother used to talk about living there like it was heaven on earth, but she never could. Caroline and Lucas lived in a newer suburb full of big identical houses, nice but soulless. Respectable, yes, but it wasn't Millbrook Heights. My house was an 1890s Victorian with 4 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, stained glass windows, a turret with a little reading nook, and a wraparound porch that felt like a hug from another era. It needed work, mostly updates to the kitchen and bathrooms, but the structure was solid. The down payment drained most of my savings, and the mortgage was hefty, but after years of playing it safe, I was ready to take a real chance on myself. I made an offer, we went back and forth, and 3 weeks later, I was officially the owner of a piece of history. I didn't tell anyone, not my mother, not Caroline. I wanted to keep this part of my life sacred. I hired a team that specialized in restoring old homes, people who understood that history wasn't something to be replaced but revived. I poured myself into every detail, refinishing the floors, preserving the crown molding, modernizing the kitchen with touches that still looked period correct. The garden, once overgrown, bloomed again. After 4 months of work, the house was transformed. Every room told a story. The turret became my office, complete with built-in shelves and a window seat overlooking the garden. The kitchen now had marble counters and hidden modern appliances behind vintage cabinetry. My bedroom featured an en-suite bath with a clawfoot tub and crisp white subway tiles trimmed in black. When I finally moved in that Saturday morning, I stood in the middle of the living room and felt something I'd never felt before. Peace. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I was meant to be. I still hadn't told my family. A part of me wanted to, maybe even craved their acknowledgement. But the wiser part of me knew that any validation from them would be meaningless. I hadn't done this for their approval. I'd done it for me. That resolve was tested 2 weeks later. I was in my office working on a new branding project when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I almost ignored it. We hadn't really talked in nearly a year, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello. Harper," she said sharply. "Caroline tells me you've been telling people you bought a house. Is this some sort of joke?" My stomach twisted. How did she even find out? "It's not a joke," I said evenly. "So you're saying you actually purchased property? Where? And how? Last I heard, you were barely scraping by with your little art projects." There it was, the tone, the disdain, the complete inability to see me as anything but a failure. "I bought a house, Mom," I said calmly. "And it's in Millbrook Heights." Silence. A long stunned pause. Then, "That's impossible. Those homes are worth millions. There's no way you could afford something there." "Are you lying to make yourself feel better?" "I'm not lying." "Then prove it. If you really bought a house in Millbrook Heights, give me the address." I hesitated. This was the crossroads I hadn't realized I'd been walking toward all along. I could protect my peace, keep my sanctuary private, or I could show her, end the constant disbelief once and for all. Against my better judgment, I gave her the address. "We're coming over," she said immediately. "Caroline and I will be there in an hour." She hung up before I could respond. For a few minutes I sat there frozen, heart pounding. Then I started gathering documents. Deed, mortgage statements, renovation receipts, income reports. I even called my accountant and real estate agent, thinking maybe they could help me prove everything was legitimate. But then I stopped. Why was I doing this? Why was I still preparing for a show and tell like a little girl desperate for approval I'd never get? I didn't owe them anything. Not explanations, not proof, not access. I texted Diane canceling my request, then took a slow walk through my home, touching the polished wood of the banister, feeling the sunlight spill through the stained glass. This was mine. No one could take that away. An hour later, my phone rang again. I was sitting on my porch swing sipping tea, watching the afternoon light dance through the oak trees that lined my street. It was my mom. I let the call go to voicemail. Then Caroline tried. I let hers ring out too. A few minutes later, the texts started flooding in. Mom, we're outside your house. Where are you? Caroline, this is ridiculous. Let us in. Mom, Harper, stop being childish. We drove all the way here. Caroline, is this really your house? How could you possibly afford this? I could picture them standing at the edge of my driveway, staring at my beautiful Victorian home, struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. My mom, the one who told me I'd never own a house like my sister. Caroline, the one who'd smirked and said I'd be broke forever. They called again. And again. My phone lit up with their names, but all I felt was peace. Finally, I picked up my phone and typed a message in the group chat they'd made. Get off my property. 4 words. That was all they got. The calls stopped. The texts went silent. Apparently that was enough. I sat there on the porch for another hour, sipping my tea, watching the sun dip below the treetops, feeling the weight of years of comparison and criticism finally fall away. Then my phone buzzed once more. It was my dad. Dad, your mother is very upset. She says you're being disrespectful. Can you please call her? I stared at that message for a long time. My dad, the man who never once defended me, who'd let my mother and sister pick me apart year after year, was now asking me to fix it. I typed back. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. He didn't reply. The next few days were silent. I half expected another barrage of messages, maybe even an unannounced visit, but nothing came. A week later, Caroline texted. We need to talk. I ignored it. She called. I declined. Then she sent a long message. Asterisk mom is really hurt. She doesn't understand why you're acting like this. We just wanted to see your house. You didn't have to be so cruel about it. Asterisk cruel. Asterisk that word caught me off guard. I'd been called sensitive, lazy, stubborn, unmotivated, but cruel? That was new. I started typing a long reply, explaining everything. The years of being compared, the constant belittling, how Thanksgiving had shattered something inside me. How I'd built my business from scratch while they mocked my art projects. How I'd bought this house on my own, proving that their narrow view of success had never defined me. I wrote it all out, pages of truth, and then deleted every word. They didn't deserve my pain. They didn't deserve access to my healing. Instead, I typed a short message. Asterisk, I'm not interested in rehashing the past. Please respect my space. Asterisk, Caroline read it but didn't respond. 2 weeks passed. I poured myself into work, took on new clients, and started planning my next expansion. 3 startups reached out in 1 week and I landed all of them. My schedule was packed, my finances were solid, and my home was my sanctuary. I was thriving. Then one afternoon my dad called again. Harper, please, he said softly. Your mother's heartbroken. Caroline feels awful. Can't we all just sit down and talk? I took a deep breath. Dad, did you ever once tell Mom to stop comparing me to Caroline? Did you ever tell them they were wrong for mocking my career? Did you ever defend me? The line went quiet. That's what I thought, I said. You wanted peace, so you let them hurt me. And now you want me to come back and pretend nothing happened so things can feel normal again. But don't you see? That's the problem. It's always about keeping peace for everyone else, never about protecting me. More silence. Finally, he said, I love you, sweetheart. I just don't know how to fix this. It's not yours to fix, I said gently. They need to own what they did. Until then, there's nothing to discuss. He sighed. You've changed. I have, I said. I finally chose myself. I'm sorry if that makes everyone else uncomfortable. When we hung up, I felt sad but also lighter. It was the first honest conversation we'd ever had. Another month went by. I turned 27 and spent my birthday exactly how I wanted. Alone by choice. I ordered Chinese takeout, watched old movies in my turd office, and felt completely content. Then one evening, an email from Caroline appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, Asterisk, I've been doing some thinking. Asterisk, I almost deleted it, but something told me to read. Harper, it began. Asterisk, I owe you a real apology. Not the kind where I make excuses. I was cruel to you, especially at Thanksgiving. I said those things because they made me feel superior, and that's ugly. The truth is, I've always admired you, and maybe even envied you. You chose something you love and made it work. I chased money and status. Now my marriage is falling apart because Lucas and I have nothing in common but ambition. My job drains me. I have 2 houses, but neither one feels like home. You, on the other hand, built something meaningful. You built a life. I think I've been jealous for a long time and I masked it with judgment. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I see you now. I see what you've done. And if you're open to it, I'd like to start over. Not as rivals, but as sisters. Asterisk, I read it 3 times. It was a real apology, specific, honest, and without excuses. More than I'd ever expected from her. But I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. I needed time to process, to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted moving forward. A week later, another email came, this time from my mother. Asterisk, Harper, I've always wanted the best for you. I pushed you because I wanted you to be successful and secure. Asterisk, I can see now that my methods were hurtful and my definition of success was far too narrow. I'm proud of Caroline, but that doesn't mean I'm not proud of you too. I've always been proud of you. I just didn't know how to show it. You're right that I should have celebrated your achievements instead of constantly comparing you to your sister. You've built something extraordinary, both with your career and this beautiful home. I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't enough. You've always been enough. I just couldn't see past my own fears about your future to appreciate your present. I hope someday you'll let me be part of your life again. But I understand if you need time. I love you. I read her email over and over for days, unsure how to feel. Was it real? Could people like her actually change? I didn't know. But what I did know was that I wasn't the same person who'd sat at that Thanksgiving table years ago, shrinking under their judgment. I was someone new, someone who had chosen herself, built something from nothing, and learned that peace doesn't come from pleasing others. Whether I ever let them back in or not, I'd already won. Not because I'd proven them wrong, though I had, but because I'd proven myself right. Right to follow my gut. Right to trust my skills. Right to believe I deserved a life that made me happy. I sat down and wrote 2 replies, one to each of them. To Caroline I said, Thank you for your apology. It means a lot that you took the time to reflect on how your words affected me. I'm not ready to jump straight into a close relationship, but I'm open to trying. Maybe we could start with coffee. No parents, no pressure. Just 2 sisters figuring things out as adults. To my mom I wrote, I appreciate your apology. I know you meant well even when it hurt. But moving forward I need respect as much as love. I need you to celebrate my wins without comparing them to Caroline's. I need you to trust that I know what's best for my own life. If you can do that, we can rebuild, but it has to be different this time. I hit send on both and felt a quiet mix of hope and caution. Caroline replied within the hour, suggesting we meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. My mom took 2 days, but when she did respond, she agreed to my boundaries and asked if we could have lunch soon. I agreed to both on my terms in places and times I chose. The coffee with Caroline was awkward at first. We'd spent our whole lives playing our parts, the golden one and the disappointment, and we didn't know how to just be. But as the conversation unfolded, the walls started to drop. She told me about her crumbling marriage, how she and Lucas had become strangers chasing the same empty success. I told her about the ups and downs of running my business. For the first time, we weren't competing. We were just talking. Your house really is incredible, she said, smiling softly. When Mom gave me the address, I looked it up online and couldn't believe it. That's one of the best neighborhoods in the city. It needed a ton of work, I said, laughing. But it was worth it. She hesitated. Would it be okay if I saw it sometime? Not with Mom. Just me. I promise I'll be respectful. I thought for a moment. My home was my sanctuary, but maybe it could also be a bridge. Sure, I said. But you have to promise. No judgment, no unsolicited advice, no backhanded compliments. She smiled. Deal. 2 days later, Caroline came over. I watched her walk through the rooms, her expression softening with every step. The restored woodwork, the vintage fixtures, the blooming garden, the office where my dreams had come to life. This is amazing, Harper, she whispered. And for once there was no smirk, no hint of rivalry, just genuine admiration. You did all this yourself? With a team, sure. But yeah, it was my vision. Her eyes filled with tears. I've been so blind. I had this idea of who you were and never stopped to actually see you. We were both stuck in those labels Mom gave us, you the mess, me the perfect one. Neither of those were ever true. My life looks perfect on paper, but it's empty. You have something real here. We talked for hours about childhood, dreams, regrets, everything. It wasn't complete healing, but it was a start. Lunch with my mom came later, and it was tougher. She cried as soon as she saw me, apologized again, told me she'd been working with a therapist to unpack her need to control. I listened, stayed calm, but kept my guard up. At the end, she said, I want to see your house. Not yet, I replied gently. Her face fell. But Caroline got to. Caroline apologized and respected my boundaries, I said. We've been rebuilding slowly. When you and I are in a better place, I'll invite you, but not yet. She didn't like it, but she accepted it. Over the next few months, things genuinely began to shift. Caroline and I met for coffee regularly. We weren't best friends, but we were finally sisters. She eventually left Lucas, and I supported her through it. She even helped me land a major client through one of her connections. My mom and I started having lunch once a month. She was really trying to change. She asked about my work without comparing me to anyone. She gave compliments without adding but. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. 6 months after the driveway incident, I finally invited her over. When she pulled up, she just sat in her car staring at the house. When she finally came to the door, her eyes were wet with tears. This is the most beautiful home I've ever seen, she said softly. I gave her the tour, and for once she didn't criticize a thing. She didn't offer advice or suggestions. She just admired. As we sat together in the living room with tea, she looked around and said quietly, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to prove something, my mother said softly, her voice trembling just a little. I'm sorry I couldn't see how amazing you already were. You've built something truly special. Not just this house, but your whole life. I'm proud of you, Harper. I should have said that a long time ago. I felt my throat tighten, tears welling up despite my best efforts to stay composed. Thank you, I said quietly. She hesitated for a moment, then asked, Can I ask you something? Of course. That day when Caroline and I came here, and you texted us to get off your property, were you home? I nodded. I was sitting right on that porch. Her eyes widened. You were here the whole time? Yes. She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. You could have let us in, shown us around, proved to us how wrong we were. I took a deep breath. I didn't need to prove anything. That's the difference between who I was and who I am now. I don't need your validation to know my worth. She nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. I taught you that you needed to prove yourself to us. I'm glad you unlearned it. We sat in comfortable silence after that, sipping tea as the light from the stained glass windows painted soft colors across the room. My relationship with my family still isn't perfect. We slip into old habits sometimes, but we catch ourselves faster now. We're all trying, and that alone is more than I ever expected. My business keeps growing. I've hired 2 more designers and a project manager, and I'm even considering opening a small studio so my team can meet in person once a week. My home remains my sanctuary, though it's no longer a secret. I've hosted dinner parties, client meetings, and even holidays here. I've learned to let people into my space because I finally feel secure enough to share it. Still, I think about that day sometimes. The day my mom and sister stood in my driveway stunned, trying to make sense of who I'd become and what I'd built. I think about those 4 words I sent. Asterisk, get off my property. Asterisk, 4 simple words, but the most powerful I've ever written. Not because they were harsh, but because they symbolize choice. The choice to value myself over their approval. The choice to set boundaries instead of begging for acceptance. The choice to build a life that belonged entirely to me. Because revenge isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just peace. It's living well, loving your life, and knowing you're enough, without needing anyone else to say it. My mom once laughed and said I'd never own a house like my sister. My sister smirked and said I'd be broke forever. I didn't argue then because deep down I knew something they didn't. I wasn't trying to own a house like hers, I was going to own something better. Something that was mine. And when they finally showed up, calling and texting from my driveway, desperate to be let in, I had the strength to say no. That was the real victory. Not the house itself, though I adore it. Not even the success of my business, though I'm proud of that too. The real victory is knowing I no longer need their applause to feel accomplished. I don't need their approval to know my worth. I don't need their presence if it costs me my peace. I built this life brick by brick, choice by choice, boundary by boundary, and it's mine. That Thanksgiving broke something in me, but it also freed me. It freed me from chasing validation I was never going to get. It freed me to become who I was always meant to be. So yes, my mom laughed. My sister smirked. They called me the failure, the dreamer, the disappointment. And then they showed up at my house, uninvited, demanding to come in. And I finally had the power to say no. Asterisk, get off my property. Asterisk, 4 words that changed everything. Because they weren't really about the house. They were about ownership of my choices, my boundaries, and my worth. I own this house. But more importantly, I own myself. And that's the sweetest revenge of all.